The days that followed the department's dinner were a blur of awkward silences and unspoken tension. Eniola and Dami had agreed to keep distance to avoid any more situation where their feelings might get the best of them. But the more they tried to stay apart, the more the cracks in their resolve began to show. Amara, oblivious to the turmoil brewing between the two of the closest friends, continued to push forward with her plans to finally win Dami's heart. She sought Eniola's advice at every turn, asking for tips on how to get his attention, on what to wear, on what to say. Eniola gave her the best advice she could muster, though each suggestion felt like a stab of her own heart. It was excruciating, pretending to be the supportive friend while knowing that the very thing Amara wanted was the one thing she could never bear to give up. The tension between Eniola and Dami grew thicker with each passing day, like a storm brewing just beneath the surface. They avoided each other as much as possible, exchanging only the bare minimum of words during group projects and lectures, but the distance didn't help at all. If anything, it made the longing worse, the unresolved emotions festering in their silence between them. One afternoon, after a particularly difficult lecture on organic chemistry, Amara bounced up to Eniola, her face lit with excitement. "Guess what?" she said, practically buzzing with energy. Eniola managed a small smile. "What's got you so hyped?" "Dami asked me to help him with his project tonight." Amara gushed, her eyes shining. "I think this is it. Eni, I think he is finally starting to see me as more than just a friend." Eniola's heart sank. She should have been happy for Amara, should have been thrilled that her friend was finally getting what she had wanted for so long. But all she felt was dread, a gnawing anxiety that settled in the pit of her stomach. "That's great, Amara," she forced herself to say, though her voice sounded hollow, even to her own ears. Amara didn't seem to notice. She was too caught up in her own excitement, too focused on the idea of finally being with Dami, to see the pain in Eniola's eyes. "I'm going to wear that new dress I bought last week," she said, her mind already racing with plans. "The one you told me was perfect for a date." Eniola nodded, her throat tight. "You look amazing," she said, her words almost choking her. She knew she should be encouraging, but every word felt like a betrayal, a lie she was telling to protect her friend from a truth that could shatter everything. That evening, as Amara prepared for her study date with Dami, Eniola sat on the bed, staring blankly at her phone. She couldn't shake the image of them together, couldn't stop the flood of emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. She wanted to scream, to cry, to do anything to release the pressure building inside her, but instead, she remained silent, her emotions trapped behind a wall of duty and guilt. When Amara finally left, a bright smile on her face and hope in her eyes, Eniola felt like she was suffocating. She couldn't stay in the room, couldn't sit there and pretend that everything was fine. She needed to get out, needed to clear her head. She grabbed her bag and left the hostel, her feet carrying her to the one place where she could think, the university gardens. It was a quiet place, away from the bustle of campus life where students often come to relax or study. Eniola had always found peace there, but tonight her mind was anything but calm. She found a bench near the rose garden and sat down, her thoughts racing. She couldn't keep going like this, couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay. But what choice did she have? She couldn't hurt Amara. She couldn't destroy her friend's dream for her own selfish desires. Yet, every time she thought about Dami, about the way he made her feel, she knew that burying her feelings wasn't working. It was only making things worse. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the garden, Eniola felt her phone buzz in her pocket. She pulled it out, her heart skipping a beat when she saw Dami's name on the screen. Can we talk? She hesitated, her fingers hovering over her screen. She knew she shouldn't. She should tell him to focus on Amara, to leave her alone so they could both move on. But her heart betrayed her, and before she knew it, she had typed out a reply. Where? His response was immediate. The gardens, by the rose gardens. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She was already there. It felt like fate, like something was pushing them together, despite all the reasons they had to stay apart. She knew this was a bad idea, knew that every time they were alone, things got more complicated. But the pull was too strong to resist. When she reached the rose garden, Dami was already there, leaning against a tree, his expression troubled. He looked up as she approached, his eyes locking onto hers. And in that moment, she knew that there was no turning back. Eni, he said softly, his voice tinged with regret. I'm sorry. She stopped a few feet away from him, her arms wrapped around herself, as if to keep from falling apart. For what? She asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. For everything, he said, his voice filled with anguish. For putting you in this position, for dragging you into my mess. I never wanted to hurt you. Her heart ached as she heard the sincerity in his voice, at the pain she saw in his eyes. Dami, this isn't just your fault, she said, her voice trembling. I'm just as responsible. We both let this happen. He shook his head, frustration evident on his face. But it shouldn't have happened, he said, his voice rising slightly. We shouldn't have let it get this far. Now, Amara, he broke off, his expressions pained. Did she say anything? Eniola asked, fears creeping into her voice. He shook his head. No, she didn't. She's completely oblivious. And that's the problem. She trusts me. She's counting on me to be the guy she thinks I am. And I don't know how to tell her that I'm not that guy. Tears welled up in Eniola's eyes as she listened to him. She understood his torment, understood the weight of guilt that was crushing them both. But she also knew that they couldn't keep going like this. We have to tell her, she said, her voice firm despite the tears that threatened to spill over. We have to be honest, Dami. It's not fair to her to keep her in the dark. She deserves the truth. Dami looked at her, his expressions filled with a mix of fear and resignation. And then what? He asked quietly. What happens after we tell her? We destroy her trust, her dreams. What then? I don't know, Eniola admitted, her voice breaking. But we can't keep lying to her. It's tearing us apart. He was silent for a long moment, his gaze dropping to the ground as he considered her words. Finally, he nodded, a decision settling over him. You are right, he said softly. We have to tell her. Eniola felt a wave of relief washing over her, but it was quickly followed by a deep sense of dread. This was the right thing to do, but it was also the hardest. She knew that the truth would change everything, would shatter the fragile balance they had been trying to maintain, but it was the only way forward. When? She asked as her voice barely above a whisper. Tomorrow. He replied, his voice steady. We will tell her together. She deserves to hear it from both of us. Eniola nodded, her heart heavy with weight of what was to come. Tomorrow, tomorrow, the word echoed in her mind, filled with the promise of pain and the hope of redemption. She knew it would be one of the hardest days of her life, but she also knew it was necessary. As they stood there in the fading light, Eniola felt a strange sense of calm settle over her. They were finally taking a step toward honesty, toward freeing themselves from the lies that had bound them. It wouldn't be easy, and the road ahead was uncertain, but at least they were facing it together. "Thank you," Dami said quietly, his voice breaking the silence, "for being brave enough to do this, to do the right thing." Eniola looked at him, her heart swelling with a mix of emotions, regret, sorrow, and a lingering affection that she couldn't fully suppress. "We will get through this," she said softly, more to reassure herself than him. He nodded, but the sadness in his eyes told her that he wasn't as sure. They were standing on the edge of a precipice, and tomorrow they would take the plunge, not knowing if they would come out whole on the other side. But for now, all they could do was wait for the dawn, knowing that once it came, there would be no turning back.